Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel The Israeli. Today we're going to talk about the arrests that the Israeli police has made after the riots that had started on May 12th. And many of you have been asking me why the Israeli police has been arresting much more Arabs than Jews. And we're going to talk about that today. So we're going to go through an article that sums up a lot of the things that come up with the riots and with the arrests. And we're going to go over it and I'll give you my take. Now, if anybody doesn't agree with me or has anything at all to add, just put it in the comments. I read everything in the comments, and if it's something that I think is important, I talk about it. And here, this is an example. Somebody asked me in the comments about the Israeli police arresting people, much more Arabs than Jews, and he asked if I can do a video about it. I gave it a few days to see what is happening, how this thing is proceeding, and now I feel like it's time to make a video about it. So if any of you want me to talk about anything at all, just ask for it and I will. Okay, so let's see what this article is saying. So Israeli police round up more than 1,550 suspects in mob violence. At least 70% of those arrested are Arab citizens of Israel. 3 Israeli Jews are charged with attempted murder of an Arab driver. Now, they are considered terrorists. Yeah, they're probably going to be tried under the Terror Act or something of the sorts. But 70% were Arabs and 30% of the arrested were Jews. So about 500 were Jews and about a bit more than 1,000 were Arabs. Okay. Yeah. Jerusalem. More than 1,550 people have been arrested over the past 2 weeks. Monday, and suspicion involved in a recent outbreak of mob violence between Arabs and Jews. Even more concerned arrest attack, the police said in a statement that thousands of police and border police officers had spread across the country to bring the rioters, criminals, and all those involved in the disturbances to justice. So this is like very similar, I guess, to what happened in the parliament in America when the QAnon and all those mobbed the parliament, and the FBI took all the photographs and all the videos and started arresting a lot of people. And it took them a while to do that, but I think it's a little bit similar here, and we'll see it also has some similarities to other things. Said that 70% of those arrested were Arab citizens of Israel, while 30% were Jewish. About 150 suspects have already been charged, the police said. The majority of incidents that took place were carried out by Arabs, Israelis, who took to the streets and attacked Jewish civilians and police officers. So again, the reason why most of the people arrested were Arabs was because the Arabs went out to the street to protest and riot. Again, very similar to protests that go on in America and become violent, and then the police has to react and make arrests. So here again, they went out to protest. The protest became very violent, and now the police is making arrests. I'll say something about this as well, about the police. The violence began as Palestinian protests in East Jerusalem and the police raid on the al-aqsa mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites, spilled over into an 11-day military conflict between Israel and Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, the terrorist group that controls Gaza. Hamas and other groups fired more than 4,300 rockets, killing 12 people. We know all that. Arab youths in Lod, a mixed Jewish-Arab city in central Israel, held a protest on May 10th that was broken up by police with stun grenades and tear gas. Angry Arab youths then went on a rampage in the city, burning synagogues and cars, throwing stones and firing sporadic rounds of gunfire. Gangs of Jewish extremist vigilantes called in from outside Lod quickly organized and began setting their own fires. So this has started spiraling out of control. But the mob started attacking innocent civilians. Yeah, not the police and not those that they see responsible for the situation, but people that lived next to them, more or less neighbors. Yeah, and this is something that both sides have to look in the mirror, and both sides have to think how they need to change. Every time that the Arabs or Ethiopians or other different groups, also the Orthodox Jews, every time they riot, you can call it protests, but every time they riot, the police really goes in very hard, and it becomes very violent. And though the police is violent almost in all protests, you can see that with some sectors they're a bit more violent than with others. Now the Arab community, I wouldn't say has been neglected, but it could have been treated better. And this Arab youth that they're talking about are bored, unemployed youth, that dropped out of school and nobody's taking care of them, and they go crazy. They get angry like many youths around the world. Now Israel also has a very big problem with murder rates in the Arab community, which we'll talk about that in a second. And spiraling into worse intercommunal violence Israel has seen in decades. Yeah, arson and vandalism spread to other mixed cities in northern Israel and the Arab towns of the Galilee, while Bedouin Arabs torched and ambushed Jews' car with stones on the road in the southern Negev desert. So what they did over there, they made they stopped cars that were just driving on a main road. Yeah, so they just stopped cars and checked who is Jewish and who is not, and if you were Jewish, you were attacked. Now this is crazy, and those people have to be arrested, whether you support their cause or not. This is criminal, and this people have to be arrested. Now other mixed cities. I live in Haifa. I come from Haifa. Haifa is a very mixed city, has been for forever, I think. I don't think there's ever been a time in Haifa where it wasn't a mixed city historically. And yes, during that time there were a few small clashes in Haifa here and there, nothing serious, because in Haifa the Arabs, I believe, and again, if you're an Arab in Haifa and you think that I'm wrong, yeah, and my impression of living there my whole life is wrong, I think the Arabs in Haifa have a good life. We have good relations with them. They have good businesses, and we know each other. Everybody has Arab friends and Jewish friends on either side. I had Arab neighbors in my building, also Ethiopian neighbors, and also Russian neighbors and different neighbors. And I think Haifa is a little bit different. That's why over there the violence hadn't really arrived Haifa. And I think Israel should learn from that. Now we can invest more in the Arabs in Haifa as well. We can and we should, but we should invest in all of our citizens. Doesn't matter what they are. And I'll talk that about different video, because Israel is divided into many different communities. And it's okay to have many different communities with their culture and their language and their way of life. That's fine. But they have to be equal under the law. And this is something that Israel has a problem with many different sectors, and I'll make another video about it another time. Okay. Over several nights, Arab and Jewish gangs sought our targets, so it escalated really seriously. 4 Jews are under investigation for fatally shooting an Arab. They're considered terrorists. We'll see if they'll be judged as terrorists, but right now it looks like they will. Okay, runs between Jerusalem. Okay, and here they give a little history of East Jerusalem and what happened there, because there was also an attack there, which means that things haven't quieted down completely, and we still have to follow to see what's going to happen. So here they say, when crime involves only Arab citizens as both perpetrators and victims, the police showed little interest, says Ms. Toma Saliman, the lawmaker from the Joint Arab Party, which used to be the biggest Arab party. There still are, but they got split now, but it's still a very strong party in the Arab community. We've been pleading for years for them to take action. Only now, she said, when the violence affects the Jewish population, were the police talking about gathering video footage from security cameras and using other technological means to locate and identify suspects. I've lost confidence in the police. They will have to earn it. Now, this is a problem because throughout the years, the murder rate in the Arab sector has been rising dramatically. Now, Israel had a problem with crime families in the Jewish sector and in the Muslim Arab sector, and they did something about it a few years ago in the Jewish sector, but they weren't able to do much about it in the Arab sector, because when they go into the Arab communities, they don't cooperate with the police. They don't trust the police. And this again has to do with the conflict as well. They don't trust the Israeli police, and they don't cooperate when crimes are done in their neighborhoods and towns. Now, the country had opened more police stations in Arab cities and towns, but it hadn't really helped. And many believe that the police and the country, the government, is just not doing enough because it doesn't affect the Jewish community. And as long as it doesn't affect the Jewish community, they don't really care about it. And now when it's spilled out to the Jewish community, now they're doing something about it. Now, many of the people in the Arab community that took part in the riots were criminals. They were criminals. When they don't do this nationalistic crimes, they do regular crimes. And they hurt Arabs most of the time. And I have to say that the majority of Arabs do not support these riots. They don't think it's good for the Arab-Jewish cooperation and relations. And the vast majority of them want to live in peace with the Jews. This was a small minority, but still big enough to make a lot of damage. And those people were arrested. So I just want to show you real quick the murder rates in the Arab community in Israel through the years. So this is from 2014 all the way up to 2020. Now, these murders here are, many of them are criminal murders, crime families, and many of them are murders inside the family, like when a family murders the daughter or a husband murders the wife, usually over honor of the family. And that's also something that Israel has to do something about, because it's not only in the Arab community that we have it actually all across the communities in Israel, but mostly in the Arab community. And that's something that has to be done about it, because I think last year there were 13 women murdered by their husbands, and that's something that has to stop. I don't know if there's a way to stop it, because some of those husbands really seemed normal, but this is a different story. So as you can see here, in 2014, 51, then 58, 66, 64, 72, 76, 96, and 2020, 112 murders in the Arab community. That's, I think, according to statistics, about 7 or 8 times higher than in the Jewish community, as far as murders are concerned. And the parliament members, the Arab parliament members, were asking for a long time now for the police to come in to the Arab towns and neighborhoods and collect the illegal weapon that is over there. And now you would say, why would Israel not mind that Arabs have illegal weapons? Isn't that dangerous for Israel? You would think that, but they point at weapons at themselves, at other Arabs. That weapon is not a conflict weapon, it's a criminal weapon. So Israel didn't really care. But now some of these weapons came out in this conflict, and now they're doing something about it, even though I have to say this is a bit of anti-Israel propaganda, because they have been doing something about it before, opening more police stations, hiring more Muslim police officers, and really trying to fix the situation. But this situation is difficult to fix because the local community does not cooperate with the police, and the crime over there is rampant. It's crazy. Okay, so this is also part of the reason, a lot of the frustrations in the Arab communities, because it's one of the poorest communities in Israel. It's still doing much better than all the Arab communities in the Arab world. That's true, but when compared to the Jewish community, it's not doing as well, and their cities are not maintained as well as Jewish cities. They're not financed as well as Jewish cities, even though the government does put money. Every year they put more and more money into the Arab community, but still it's not enough, because there are many things that have to be done besides money. There are many things that have to be taken care of in those communities besides money, and Israel is running different communities parallel to each other, and this has to stop, and I'll talk about it in a different video. Okay, so this is the murder rates, and this spilled out in this riot, in this conflict, and this is one of the reasons why the police is arresting much more Arabs than Jews. One of the reasons. Okay, so I think this is more or less it. Now, another thing that they brought up, that she said here, the parliament member, that many of the people that were arrested were not arrested by the police. They were arrested by the security institution, the Israeli FBI, the Shabak. And that is probably true, because Hamas leader said in an interview a few days ago that there are 10,000 Hamas operatives, Hamas fighters inside Israel, like Israeli Arab citizens that are working for Hamas, 10,000 of them. Now, in Israel, there are almost 2 million Arabs. 10,000 is a very small percentage. So even he can just say it, as a guess, and statistically he'll probably be right. But if there are 10,000 Israeli Palestinians that are actually working with Hamas, like spies, that would be considered a spy, a dormant cell, or a dormant terrorist cell, or whatever you want to call it. Of course, the Shabak, the Israeli FBI, will have to do something about it. And they will arrest some people that they think are involved with Hamas and not the police, because that's just how security forces work. So it makes sense that some of them were arrested by the Shabak, and they'll be investigated, and we'll follow this story and we'll see what happens. So I hope this video answers some of the questions you guys have about the arrests that are made in Israel after the riots, and why more Israel-Palestinian are being arrested than Israeli Jews. And if you have any other questions, if you feel like I didn't answer everything you wanted to know, if you think I'm whitewashing something, just put it in the comments and I'll answer it. I have no problem. Just please be respectful. And that's it, more or less. So as always, those of you who watched all the way to the end, thank you very much. If you like this content, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. It helps a lot, and this channel really needs it. And I'll see you on the next video, and have a great day. Bye.